you so much all for joining tonight. We're really thrilled to have you here tonight at Feel the Heat, Stories and Strategies for Western Australia's Rising Future. My name is Carol Green, and I'm going to be joining you from Western Australia Council of Social Service. And we're joined tonight by Conservation Council's Go Beyond Gas team. We're really pleased to be putting on this event in the midst of a heat wave to be talking about heat and the strategies that we need to have around this is really important. Before we get started, I just want to make clear that we do have two emergency exits here as well. So just out this way and this way as well. We can remove the chair. And before we get into it as well, I just want to introduce Daniel Bartlett, who's joining us tonight. It's really an honor to be introducing him. He's a Noongar man in Wajak in Ute country and has been a strong cultural advocate on education around caring for the country and a culture advisor to many NGOs, community groups, and local state government agencies. He's a member of Noongar Native title claim groups throughout Noongar country as well. He's been performing all things cultural in schools, universities, and around the world for 37 years. His dancing company and dinge playing has taken Daniel all over the world, but his focus is on cultural education around an ancient world of knowledge and two-world living. He's worked with youth and Aboriginal rangers throughout Noongar country. We're really pleased to be having you here tonight.
Yeah, so what I was thinking about, start off the year, I like to think a bit different. So it depends on the topic. And the topic and the reason that brings us here, I was thinking about that in the song. I was starting putting them up, that Kala, it's getting warmer and warmer across the Buja. And the ladies and the gentlemen that is here, and the next generation, my daughter, for the Pullingas is to come together, to work out, how we're going to work together. I don't know if we can solve this problem. It's about this heating up, but basically that's what I'm thinking about. And it's a great opportunity because when we're talking about the stories and the strategies, for Western Australia. And the rising temperatures is not only in Western Australia, it's all over the world. So it's definitely something that people around the world are paying more and more attention to. I can recall, as a small boy talking about this, in front of my class, about the things that we're facing now. And basically, I laughed at it, all the time because the lack of human beings' respect for Mother Earth was, at an all-time high when we're looking back in the 70s, late 60s to 70s to the 80s, and I was born in 74. So, I was basically, brought up, with the stories of the changes. So I know a lot about the Earth's environment from ancient stories that was passed down to me in songs that was sung to me, not only by Noongar people, but the Yamaji people and my family up in the Kimbees and right across the Northern Territory and right across Australia. So by the time I was 17, I had the privilege to travel, right around Australia to talk about a lot of the issues that was, facing not only Aboriginal people, but people were seeing changes, and it was happening, in a rapid, excessive rate that, it's got the attention now in the whole world. So there's something happening now, we can all agree on that. And it is getting a lot warmer. And, one of the things that we as human beings got to figure out is whether, as a direct result of our lifestyles, that we're the problem, or are we just going through this cycle that it changes every 1,000 years, 10,000, I don't know, we don't know. But, walking up in the mountains, and it's not too much mountains in Northern. The heat was like 49 degrees, 50 degrees, the temperature that gauge in the car. And so the forecast for that day, or the temperature that it reached down in the town area, because it's a gully area, got to about 40, 45 that day. But up in the mountains where there's less trees, it's extreme of trees. Now, you don't have to be a genius to figure out, flying. The first time I flew, and you flying out in the wheat belt, as far as I could see, and we're all here wondering what's going on with the Earth. perfect example out there. But it's not only that. My recent travels that I travel all over the world, I'm a frequent flyer, and I have a look at the landscape and the topography in every country I go. And the only two countries that I'm not too concerned about is in Canada and New Zealand. Everywhere else it's just mass farming and blocks and squares, and as far as the eye can see. And so the first time when I saw that, I cried as a 16, 17-year-old, just to see that and think, well, okay, you know, this is not good, you know. But I was sad, but at the same time, I was, you know, grateful that I had that opportunity to see with my own eyes the devastation that human beings are having on Mother Earth, because we want to make a living. I get it, I understand. But honestly, the only thing we can do is, you know, work together collaboratively, you know, for a better future. And a lot of that, unfortunately, and fortunately, it's about more trees. We need more trees. Simple as that. We need a whole lot more trees, because the trees are going at a rapid rate, and yeah, it's extremely concerning and absolutely devastating for a First Nations man to see as far as his country, as far as I can see, it's all farming country, and it's hot, just everywhere. And the only piece of trees that you see alongside the roads and that's it, and all little creeks, and they're all drying up too. So in my lifetime, being as young as I am, you know, still in my prime, I consider as a 49-year-old, I see, I bear witness to all the springs all being dried up. They're all gone now in my country. Now, last time when I saw that, there's an interesting fact, is that the last time I saw it was about 27 years ago, when all the springs were still intact, right through the wheat belt country. They're not there. They're all dried up. And unfortunately, mankind in their pursuit for greed and the neglect that they you know, put the pressure on Mother Earth, is where is it going to end? You know? And so that responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, no matter what colour you use, what background you come from, or where you come from in the world, that we need to you know, come together and stand united on that front to you know, agree that there's something seriously happening. And stop talking in your lecture theatres about this and that, whatever, but let's come up with some sort of solutions and put enough pressure on whoever it is that we have to, as a collective, as one group of people around the world, is my wish to make it a little bit better. It's all we can ask, because we'll slow it down or something, we'll give it back, you know, and there's not one person that can do that. Not, you know, not one person. It is a collective, it is us as human beings, the whole human being species. Us as humans need to fix it. And the first thing we need to do is to, you know, agree upon that. And don't worry about who's saying this and who's doing that, and, you know, looking important or letting egos get in the way. I see a lot of that happen. And a lot of people have serious ego problems, and they need to put that aside and come together for a common purpose, that to acknowledge the fact that if we don't do something, yeah, pretty soon, it's going to be, you know, 50, 55 degrees in the next 10 years, I think, because that's the only thing I can see. But like I said, you know, I really want to share that, because, you know, after being right around Australia and, you know, around the world, and having these conversations with other Indigenous people, as well as experts and scientists, and, you know, in their field, they're all concerned. Everybody's concerned, and we got to do something. And what that is having events like this. I think is a perfect, you know, opportunity to start off here. And because to be quite frank, I'm sick of it. You know, I'm only 49. You know, it's like forever a lot of talking but no doing, and that, you know, could be a problem. Whether is that what is it? Is it a state government, federal government, is it corporation? What is it? You know, and it's all of the above. You know, and farmers. It's everybody trying to make a dollar. Okay, let's be honest. That's what it's about. But at the expense of what? Is what's concerning me. At the expense that your kid's going to grow up in this type of world that we've neglected. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable behaviour, and I think that there's a responsibility of all human beings on the earth to come together and try to sort out something. And with that, I extend, like always, my help. If anybody needs any help, or I don't know, whatever, that I'm always available, and I always make myself available because I believe in making a better environment and a safer earth, basically. I mean, that's about it. But like I said, I just thought it was really important because 49 years, born in 74. I saw all these things and I ate from rivers, saw the water as fresh as the day, see all the way short, grabbing turtles myself, eating jewelries that I miss freshwater marine in the country, in the creeks, all gone. All dry, the water's all dried up, no more food there. And as far as I'm concerned, that's an absolute disgrace of my culture that I can't teach this to my kids anymore, but they ain't there. I have memories looking at these sacred places, wishing, Dad, I could pass it on. But you can't because it's gone. And that's sad. That's sad. It's all right for a lot of people. You're going to walk in a shop, you live in a shop. You live your whole life shopping. That's all you've ever done. Never ever done any dirty work with your hands. Never killed a kangaroo to eat to survive thousands of years. Once the certain things are taken from you in that way, it's a violation. It's violating, and it's extremely hurtful. And so I just, want to be completely honest about that. And that's what basically I was singing in that song, about how I feel and my family, and I feel sorry for my country. So I was singing all of that in language about how I feel, and sometimes I prefer singing in language and talking in language, so no one understands. Just go and find a lot, because I find solace in it. And when Aboriginal people were doing ceremonies, what we were doing ceremonies for, so that we wouldn't have heat waves. When they had floods right across the nation, what was we doing ceremonies for? So we wouldn't have floods. So that thousands and thousands of years of relationship with Mother Earth, and then that gets stripped away, or we stop doing that for whatever reason, then all of a sudden everything gets chaotic. And that's something to think about when you're talking about the stories. And so I, like I said, when I was introduced, that I invest in the next generation. I have to invest in the next generation, because our generation ain't going to fix nothing. I believe that we must encourage the next generation to do that. And one of the things I want is to do ceremonies, because I'm only one person. I want to pass it on to my kids, so that they go back out and sing in the country, give them up the country, and in return, those ceremonies, you'll have a good environment. So I think that's one of the major problems is that there's no more ceremony of Aboriginal people having a special relationship with the country like nobody ever can. And when they stop doing that, I go up to them and say, excuse me, why will you stop doing the ceremonies in the country? You need to start doing that again and singing to that country. Pick it up, talk to it, and sing to it. And it will provide everything for you that you need. So I think that that's really important, and there needs to be a lot more emphasis on encouraging Aboriginal people to get back out in their country and doing ceremony to protect your land wherever you live. And that's the only thing that I can seriously think of in solving a lot of these problems, because it's not out there and I'm only one person. It's a big job, but that's what I think was happening. So that's my speech on it. Thank you.
Really appreciate what be gathering today, and I want to also add and acknowledge the traditional owners in this forum tonight, people recognizing that we're on stolen lands tonight, and also pay my respects to the many lands that are tonight as well on live stream. Just as a reminder that this event is being live streamed as well. We are pleased to welcome several members of Parliament tonight as well that have set aside time for this event. We want to specifically welcome the Honourable Brad Petit and then as well the Honourable Dr. Brian Walker and the Honourable Mr. Jeff Baker, and the Honourable Carolyn is joining online as well. It's an honor to have you. So tonight we're talking about heat. We're in the midst of a heat wave, and we're talking about what it means to be doing something around this. Very simplistically put, heat kills more than any other disaster. It kills, and it's an extreme weather event that needs to be addressed. We've seen heat waves hit across WA this summer. There have been recorded peak temperatures in the Pilbara of 47.9 degrees. Just this week, we've had heat across the state, and the impacts of heat are real and they're happening now. And it's time that we talk about populations that are most at risk and that are vulnerable due to systemic issues. I hear many things happening around heat where people are concerned about it but don't know what to do. And that ranges from things like, I can't turn on my AC because electricity is expensive. Cost of living crisis is hitting at home and people don't know how to deal with heat on top of that. I hear things saying that my landlord hasn't fixed things and so I can't deal with it as well. We hear about people saying, well, I used to deal with high temperatures, so I should be fine now. There's all sorts of things that make it really difficult to deal with heat. And it's a really sobering thing to address. We need to make sure that people know about this. We also can't expect the individuals to deal with it. We need to start protecting our communities, and we need to start providing spaces for people to be safe. So tonight is about addressing that burden and coming together as a community to do that. Heat waves are already a problem, and we know it's going to get worse. And so we have some experts here tonight that will be talking us through some of the ways that we can be addressing this. We're really pleased that BOM is joining us, as well as Doctors for the Environment Australia, as well as Clare, Gibellini. And before we get going, I'll just pass it on to go beyond gas, and then we'll move on to the panels as well.
It's pretty hard, Matt. My name is Gibellini. I work at the Conservation Council of WA, the Preparedness Asset. I want to thank them for this time to big Aboriginal land. I would also like to extend my gratitude, thanks to Wayne Cost, West Australian Council for the Social Services. Bureau, is that it? Yeah, Bureau of Meteorology, Better Renting, and Sheltering Cities, plus everyone in attendance tonight for their collaboration on this event and also for your commitment to climate justice. We are here to shine another light on the climate emergency that is unfolding in Western Australia. Global heating is a problem that is very much present in our everyday lives. Regardless of where we live in WA, it's costing us lives, species, ecosystems, and economic output. The urgency of the climate emergency must be realised. The need to act to minimise risk was unambiguously clear about 1990. Our mitigation and adaptation response now will not only shape the future we so often refer to, but the present that we have to live through now. We have moved beyond a critical time into a full-blown climate and environmental crisis. Climate change is turning natural disasters into unnatural disasters. And of these disasters, it is heat waves that are the biggest natural disaster that we face. Though less visible than other natural disasters, the health and mortality impacts of heat waves far outweigh those of bushfires, cyclones, floods, storms, and earthquakes combined. They continually hit Western Australia as global temperatures continue to rise. These heat waves are becoming more likely, more severe, more frequent, and the time frame of occurrence is extending throughout the year. With current trajectories placing us at 2.7 to 3 degrees warming by the end of the century, these impacts are set to worsen, but to how much, that depends on our response. Every fraction of a degree that we can shave off this total will save lives. Global studies that have sought to identify a threshold temperature beyond which climatic conditions turn deadly are estimated at 35 degrees. These thresholds are now being passed excessively in Perth, Bulu, and throughout WA. At our current rates, entire sections of Northern Australia will become sacrifice zones to petrochemical plants and excessive heat. Studies estimate that anthropogenic global warming is already responsible for 1 in 3 heatwave deaths worldwide between 1991 and 2018. It is predicted that as global heating continues, heatwaves will kill hundreds of thousands of people each year worldwide. This will not be news to any of you in this room, but it is fossil fuels that are by far the biggest contributor to climate change. Yet the WA government and fossil fuel majors in this state are refusing to heed this message. WA is Australia's petro state. We're the only state in Australia whose emissions have increased since 2005. This is the benchmark year for our national emission reduction targets. We are the only state in Australia without a 2030 emissions reduction target. And these 2030 targets are critical for reaching international climate goals. And if this wasn't enough, WA has 21 new fossil fuel projects in the pipeline and is intent on improving the biggest new fossil fuel project in the Southern Hemisphere, that being the North West Shelf project extension, a project that will spew greenhouse gases into the atmosphere until 2070. We are not incapable of taking climate action. We have chosen not to. The consequences of inaction have resulted in the loss of human life and the loss of an entire species. Such are the results of scientific reality not being applied to public policy. A rich state with a small population such as WA with vast sources of renewable energy should be doing a whole lot more. WA's fossil fuel of choice is gas. Gas is not a transition fuel, it is a fossil fuel. And when lifetime methane leakages are taken into account from gas projects, they are often found to be dirtier, much dirtier than coal. Our governments have either turned their backs or dragged their feet on taking meaningful climate action. Heat waves are going to be to continue to be a major source of climate casualties in WA's future. They are the silent killer, and they need to be treated more seriously. We need to take immediate and definitive action to both mitigate and adapt to anthropogenic climate change and minimize mortalities. There are mechanisms for change available through both mitigating greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to climate change impacts that we face. Most critically, we need to ban new and expanded fossil fuel development in WA. We need to set scientifically backed emissions reduction targets that are Paris aligned, including 2030 targets, and we need to plan for WA to go beyond gas. These steps are necessary to keep our state and the planet as habitable as is now possible. Our actions this decade will have profound consequences for thousands of years. WA's current strategy of trying to adapt to climate change whilst greenlighting fossil fuel projects, whilst greenlighting fossil fuel projects is both contradictory and entirely dangerous. Fossil fuel companies are not willing to follow the dictates of the WA public. They are not just taking away our future, they are sacrificing people, places, and culture here and now. They will concede nothing without public demand. The binding constraint on our well-being is the climate. It's not our ability to extract fossil fuels. There are no excuses left. The future we dreaded is already with us.
I will introduce the first speaker now. So we've got James Ashley, who's the WA Manager of Hazard Preparedness and Response at BOM. James has extensive knowledge of operational meteorology across a range of natural hazards faced in WA, particularly cyclones, fire, and severe thunderstorms. James will be sharing information on how heat waves are identified and the importance of preparing for it. We're a little bit behind on our slides. Well,
thanks, Shelby, and thanks everyone, and thanks again for the really powerful welcome start of the country. My name's James Ashley. I thought I'd just talk a bit about how we define heat waves in the Bureau, what constitutes a warning for a heat wave, and then talk a little bit about what that looks like in the context of Perth, as most people in this room can sort of relate to that, I guess. Certainly acknowledging that a heat wave is quite different from a heat wave in Broome and Connemara or heat wave in Autism. And then have a quick look about the sort of the history of heat, and then the sort of projections of heat into the future. So we issued a heat wave warning today for starting on a heat wave, but really great timing. And we often, as soon as we hit a heat wave, the social media bandits out there start giving us some really constructive feedback. And this is just a snapshot of taken about a week ago when our last heat wave warning. Yeah, you get the gist, pretty much the same comments every single time. So I thought this idea, it's not a heat wave, it's just summer. I thought we'd sort of talk a bit about that as I walk through the slides. So firstly, how do we define a heat wave? Now there's many ways to do it. So this is the way we do it in Meteorology. We take into account the maximum and minimum temperature over the course of 24 hours and to compare it to basically everywhere in WA. So it's going to be unusually warm, both the maximum and minimum, over a 3-day period in relation to the local. And some maths for very easy. I thought perfect opportunity to put some maths up there. Don't worry about this too much, but firstly, that significance index up there, 0.1. So we're comparing those 3 days, the average temperature over those 3 days. It's got to be in the top 5% of temperatures for that location that even start hitting a signal in our heat wave products. And then we look at how hot it's been over the last 30 days. So we compare it to the climatization index. So if it's been pretty warm and it's just a little bit warmer than normal, it's probably not going to be a strong signal in heat wave as if we're coming out of a cooler period and then suddenly it's really warm. Basically that we're comparing how significant the heat is to each location compared to normal. So it's going to be a lot warmer than normal and it's going to be warmer than the last 30 days. And we categorize them into 3 categories: low, severe, and extreme. And we all have a severe and extreme heat waves. So severe heat waves typically challenging those people, and extreme heat waves dangerous. And why do we want them? Liam mentioned it, articulated it very well in his talk earlier. It's basically when you look at hospitalisation, heat accounts for by far the majority of weather-related injuries. So it is that in the Bureau with cyclones, they're the really cool things, or the cool kids look at cyclones and meteorology, but heat is where it's at as far as impacts. So what does it look like for a heat wave on Perth? So this is data, average temperature, remember, so it's average of the maximum and minimum over a 24-hour period. So that's the average daily temperature, and then across the x-axis here we've got days before the heat wave, so 30 days before the heat wave. Day 0 is the start of the heat wave. So this is the temperature from the heat wave we just come out. So the last day here is Tuesday, I think. You can see there's a couple of hot days, hot 24-hour periods, but it's not across a long enough period. In the last 3 days, it doesn't constitute a heat wave. So we look at the average across those 30 days. That's summer. That line is summer. The solid line is the heat wave. So it's significantly warmer than the previous 30 days, and it's lasts for at least 3 days. So that's a severe heat wave. Just for interest, across summer, that 24 to 25 is about the average daily temperature, so maximum. So that's pretty much basically summer, and a few extra hot days. Now, everyone will, if you're in Perth Christmas a couple of years ago in 2021, you would have lived through this heat wave. Again, there's a few hot days in the lead up, but it got really hot over that 25th, 26th, 23rd December of 2021. You can see the build up, so that climatization over 30 days, that's what's normal. And then we have this abnormally hot period across that Christmas period. And you see the difference between those two lines is significant as far as I can see this goes. And as far as the Perth goes, we're picking quite Perth specific. Over the last 60 or 70 years, we've basically averaged 2 of the severe type heat waves every year. But we've only had 2 extreme heat waves. So it's not like we're always cashing out these heat wave warnings. They're fairly frequent for a particular location. We're putting out these warnings a lot when we're taking the whole of WA. But for a certain location, we could only see them. Okay, we're probably saying this again, we're talking about what's normal, what's not. This is really normal when we see this is a plot of the number of extreme heat days. So during the top 1% of across Australia, so it's average across Australia of days in a month. So the hottest 1% of days. Normally you'd see that only in a few years you have one of those days. And you can see quite a marked shift to once we hit the sort of 90s and into the 2000s. We're seeing those multiple extreme heat days every year. 2019 was a particularly hot season. Don't have 2023 here, but it would be at least as many as 2023. So that's the Australian context. Global context, you've probably seen this in the news as well. This is the global temperature for each month. Before we concentrate on the red line, really shows that nice indication of how over the course of decades, with every single month, this is a global scale. And then last year, you've seen in the news, completely out of the box, some, being that far above other years is really significant. Normally, when you break records in a global scale, you only break them by a tiny bit, and we broke it by a whole lot. Just very quickly, how's it looking going on from here? Global temperatures will continue to rise, and heat waves will become more frequent and more impactful. And just very quickly, again, localizing back to these are projections. This is on a medium emission scenario. So by 2100, 4.5 units, basically concentrated from greenhouse gases by 2100. So again, this is probably a good news scenario, but you can still see a significant warming across those decades. And just for interest, Liam again mentioned 35 degrees. That bottom sort of shows the number of days we can expect in that climate projection model. That's all I had. So out of time. So I'll hand it back to Carolyn.
Sorry guys, we're still trying to fix some online tech issues for those viewing online. But thank you so much, James. That was really, really insightful. Next, I'd like to invite up Clare. Clare is a passionate advocate for the inclusion of people with disability in all spaces of society. She's the co-chair of the Oversight Council for the Australian Federation Government's first National Autism Strategy, and a member of the National Disability Insurance Agency Independent Advisory Council's Equity and Inclusion Reference Group. She's also the deputy chair of the WA Ministerial Advisory Council on Disability. Thank you so much.
How's that? I'm also an emergency services volunteer and I'm fucking tired. Right? You know what kind of year we're having. The community I belong to. I was talking to somebody about what we're seeing today, and she called my people, my community, the canary in the coal mine. for everybody else. That's not okay. That's not okay. Yes, I'm very passionate, and I make absolutely no excuses for that. And I have to take the shoes off. Just think I can't finish it. We're not okay. We're not okay on a lot of fronts. And these are some of the things that most people don't necessarily think about, but some of the things that we're experiencing that are actually what I believe are barriers to our survival these days. And, you know, I'm talking about people with disability, invisible, visible, all over the world. Some of the things that we're talking about, information. It's not always, poor James, I'm going to pick on James, but we're not always getting those messages out in accessible formats, meaning it's very difficult for us to actually prepare adequately. We're reliant on very fragile infrastructure. The power goes out. I live in a metro area up in the Perth Hills. The power goes out. As soon as I've got 2 days of 35 degrees or more, it's gone. I can move, but a lot of my friends can't. How do they charge their wheelchairs? How do they charge their communication devices? Those sorts of things. It actually costs us a lot more to have a disability. I was doing some research on just how much, and the average cost of disability over a long term is much, much higher, and actually equates to almost 63% of the adult equivalent of disposable income. So you tell me how to manage to pay for the power bill, for the air conditioning, for the extra medication when it expires faster, for when our batteries on our chairs and our equipment runs out faster. Tell me where we find the money for that. I'm sorry, I'm getting very fired up. I don't think I need to tell anybody here about the inadequacy of housing stock that we have, particularly for my community that lives a lot of our community in social housing. It doesn't often have air conditioning. It's very old and often promotes inefficient energy use. Interestingly, more modern housing codes that encourage air tightness, lots and lots of insulation, can actually contribute to increased heating in the homes as well. I didn't know that. Of course, these are energy costs, additional energy for heating, cooling, mobility, communication, life-saving equipment that we require, actually makes it very difficult for us sometimes to adopt energy efficient measures. Then we can talk about intersectionality. Things like socioeconomic status, our gender, our ethnicity, our birthplace, residence, whether or not we belong to the LGBTQIA+ community. All of these things, as well as disability, mean we face multiple layers of disadvantage. And the impact of climate change on us is referred to as threat multipliers. That doesn't make me feel good. One of the biggest barriers to survival is that we're not included. We're not included in policy. They want to talk about the Paris Agreement. Of the 192 state parties or countries that have signed up to the Paris Agreement, only 35 have actually completed in their climate mitigation. Doesn't that make sense?
We talk about hate being a silent killer. There was a study done from 2001 to 2018 that focused on examining the impact of heroes on the know that data is incomplete because not all of the deaths, not all of the deaths distributed. It followed on from other studies that identified that with the exception of disease epidemics, extreme heats are the most important natural hazards. identified 350 as heat wave and 316 of those. Some of those. 116 of the victims. These voices of the people that I spend time with every day. There's up on the top of the red tank corner. It's who is the First Nations name. So, potential refugee from this country. It doesn't have chance as an individual if it doesn't have evidence, she's now back in justice, back in the law. Elizabeth is a very good friend of mine, it's not it's not their names. I know she spent 6 hours on the training last year. It's the only place she could get forward out there and moved on. Now First Nations presidents. And who relies on that very fragile industry. It's not the thing about climate change, you know, we call it silent killer. I want to challenge that. I don't think it's that silent, I just think it's that's the exclusion of people with disabilities from climate policy it's terrifying, especially given the mountains of evidence that we also every summer for us is a long life. So make no mistake, the ongoing failure of states parties around the world to take affirmative measures to prevent the harms caused by climate change and to consider our rights and perspectives in the design and implementation of climate policies actually constitute clear breaches of Australia's obligation under the Declaration of the Rights of Persons, Universal Human Rights Declaration, the Sendai Framework, same with the laws. I just want to finish up. I don't know if Dr. Timlo is in the audience or online. Yeah, I had a phone call last year. He gave me a bit of an analogy. He talked about his feeling of humanity crowded into a bus that was this. But the communities like mine, the various constitutions. It feels a little bit more
Thank you so much. Next, I would like to invite up Dr. Carolyn Clare. Carolyn is a neurologist with special interest in cognitive and
Heat waves are Australia's deadliest natural hazard. They're more dangerous than snakes, spiders, sharks. They're more dangerous than cyclones, they're more dangerous than floods, and they're more dangerous than storms. But why is heat so deadly to human beings? To answer this, let's think about what happens to our bodies when we heat up. Now, normally we tightly control our core body temperature to 37 degrees Celsius. If we start to heat up, the brain uses conscious and unconscious mechanisms to keep our temperature under control. The unconscious part of the reaction comes from a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus does three things. First of all, it makes us vasodilate. So what happens is little blood vessels called capillaries open up all over our skin, and that allows us to radiate off heat. The second thing that happens is we sweat, and this allows us to evaporate heat off, a strategy that doesn't work so well when the humidity is high. The third thing that the hypothalamus does is it causes us to experience an intense sensation of thirst. And this means that we'll drink fluids to start replacing what we're sweating off. Now, these physiological responses don't work quite so well if you're older, if you have illnesses, or if you're on certain very commonly prescribed medications. The conscious part of the reaction to heat comes from our cortex, and it's behavioural. When it gets too hot, what do? We shrug off some clothes. We stop physically exerting ourselves. We move somewhere cooler if we can, and we drink fluids. Thank you. Now, note all of this depends on us being consciously aware that we're heating up and also having the physical ability to move somewhere cooler and access those fluids. And this isn't necessarily the case if you have certain physical or intellectual disabilities, if you have dementia, and it's certainly not the case if you're a small child. Now, assume that these physiological mechanisms are failing and we're starting to heat up. Our core temperature should be at 37 degrees Celsius, but under the stress of heat, we're starting to get hotter and our core temperature reaches 38 degrees Celsius. At this point, we're starting to feel really hot and really sweaty or uncomfortable. Our heart starts to pump really hard, and what it's doing is it's trying to push blood from our internal organs to our skin to radiate and evaporate off heat. This is starting to starve our internal organs of the blood they need for us to survive. It doesn't work. We keep on heating. Our temperature increases and increases. Now we're at 39 degrees Celsius. At this point, we're feeling incredibly unwell. We're weak and we're dizzy. Our heart is now under incredible strain, even if you're young and healthy. Our kidneys are being starved of blood. And remember, what our kidneys do is they clean the blood. And at the same time, our gut is starved of blood. And what's happening is it's starting to let toxins and bacteria into our bloodstream at the same time as our cleaning mechanism is falling down on the job. It doesn't work. We keep on heating. We hit 40 degrees Celsius core temperature and go higher yet. Now, at this stage, your body is cooking. You're feeling incredibly unwell, and then something critical happens. Your brain starts to fail. You become delirious, you're confused, you may start having seizures. There is no chance you can get yourself out of this critical situation right now. You need urgent medical attention, and this is a true medical emergency with at least a 1 in 10 chance of death. Now, if we get to you fast enough, hopefully we can save you with rapid cooling, but there's a good chance you're going to be left with disability. This is heat stroke. Now, heat stroke, people with heat stroke are the visible victims of heat waves. And typically, think about construction workers on a site. Think about soldiers on the march. Think about an athlete in training. Most poignantly of all, think about a child or a baby strapped into a car seat. These are the visible victims of heat. And certainly heat waves cause, as we've heard, dramatic spikes in the mortality rate, the death rate. But in fact, the majority of people who die from heat aren't actually dying from heat stroke at all. They are the invisible victims. You see what happens in a heat wave. I mean, even single heat waves can have enormous increases in mortality. For example, there was a heat wave in Victoria in 2009 where nearly 400 people died over and above the expected death rate. But these people didn't die of heat stroke. What they actually died of was heart attacks, strokes, cardiac arrhythmias, and respiratory failure. So doctors didn't recognise that these people were dying from heat waves until after the event when we saw this dramatic spike in death. And it's not just death rates that go up, it's also illnesses. We've all had the experience, probably last night and certainly tonight, of trying and failing to go to sleep in a room that's too hot. Sleep quality declines during a heat wave, and human beings dream less. Mental health deteriorates, people with bipolar disorder and depression get worse, and as a result of that, suicide rates go up, accidents go up, violence increases, and so does murder. Now, predictably, what this means is that our healthcare system, which is someone who's worked in it for the last 20 or 30 years, can tell you is constantly at capacity. Our healthcare system comes under a lot of stress. And we know that when there's a heat wave, and admissions to the emergency department increase by about 10%. I'm getting too hot. That puts a terrible strain on our paramedics, our general practices, our emergency departments, and also all of us who work in the hospital system. Now, what can really make things worse is when everyone's switching on their air conditioning at the same time causes a power blackout. And as we know, this happened in Kalgoorlie, 2 or 3 weeks back. Imagine suddenly your fridge doesn't work anymore, your electric fan, your air conditioning. You're in real trouble at the same time as the emergency services are compromised. This is a disaster in a disaster, and it compounds health risks. And it's particularly dangerous during those heat waves where it doesn't cool down at night. Then things really go off the charts. Now, we talked about how heat is a silent killer, although it's not silent to the medical profession. We know this. We know this now. But heat is also a selective colour, and the truth is that not everyone is equally vulnerable to heat waves. You can be biologically vulnerable or socially vulnerable. Now, certain people are more vulnerable because they're older or have illnesses. Pregnant women are more vulnerable, and their unborn babies as well. You have less chance of being born healthy or at all in a heat wave. Children under the age of 5 are more vulnerable. But also what makes people vulnerable is their social circumstances. And heat wave deaths are concentrated in Australia's poorest suburbs. The reason for this, of course, is that people in poorer suburbs typically live in smaller houses that are poorly designed. They may or may not have air conditioning or electric fans, and even if they did, they might not feel able to turn them on because of concerns about not being able to pay their bills. Now, typically these suburbs have little or no tree canopy cover, so they're hotter anyway, and usually these people have limited access to blue space or green space. It's important for us to mitigate the health consequences of heat waves. It really is, but we also need to address the underlying driver of the problem. And that, without question, is climate change. Climate change is being driven by burning of fossil fuels, and that is coal, oil, and gas. Western Australia is a simply enormous fossil fuel exporter. Australia overall is the 3rd biggest fossil fuel exporter in the world. These are companies that are very familiar to us here in Western Australia, like Woodside, Chevron, Santos, and Inpex. In the face of the climate emergency and evidence everywhere of health impacts, the fossil fuel industry is responding by expanding its operations. This madness is being facilitated by our current state government and subsidised by every single one of us by our federal taxes. Now, question, if you came across an overflowing bath, would you start scooping out water or would you turn off the tap? All of us would turn off the tap. And although it's important to look after each other, our families, and everyone around us when a heat wave happens, we've also got to address the underlying problem. It's time for us to turn off the tap. Get the oil and gas industry in the rest of Australia.
Yeah, thank you everyone for such a wonderful panel. You all have so much knowledge. Yeah, I can personally attest to it. I live in Midland in the eastern suburbs. So tomorrow, Saturday, is going to be 43 degrees in England. And I compared that in Frio, we're only getting to about 38, 39. So definitely within her. We're all feeling the heat, but there are definitely areas that are more impacted than others. But regardless, people all over WA are already suffering the effects of the climate crisis. And WA has experienced some high heat. But what we're seeing now is far more frequent and intense than we've ever seen before. Every fraction of degree of warming matters and can be measured in lives and detrimental impacts on well-being. The well-being of our communities, especially those most vulnerable to high heat, depends on what's happening now. Big gas, as Carolyn alluded to, is fueling this climate crisis more than any other industry in Western Australia. Despite overwhelming evidence that supports reducing emissions and quickly, WA is rapidly expanding its most polluting industry. It's possible to move WA beyond gas to become a renewable energy superpower. However, the WA gas industry wants to keep expanding its operations until 2070, which is, of course, at odds with WA's net zero 2050 target. So one of the most powerful ways we can mitigate even higher heat into the future is by stopping new fossil fuel projects from going ahead. And we need your help to do that. This is a critical time when we need to rapidly reduce emissions to avoid the worst consequences of climate change and keep global warming to a minimum. In order to do this, we need to call on our State Environment Minister, Reece Whitby, to reject extensions to the North West Shelf. This is one of the oldest and most polluting gas processing and export facilities in Australia, located on Rotorua, also known as the Bark Peninsula. It's in the Pilbara in WA. Woodside and its joint venture partners have permission to process gas at the North West Shelf until the current gas fields are depleted, which would happen this decade, but are now seeking to extend the life of this facility until 2070. I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to be almost 70 then. Feels like we should have done something about this climate change business by then. And this would emit an additional 4.394 billion tonnes of carbon pollution. This is equivalent to over 9 times Australian annual emissions. And the scale and emissions intensity of this extension is enormous and will have significant impacts on our climate and our health. So this is just to show, this is the total emissions of the North West Shelf compared to our current coal power plants. So this is just to show, yeah, the enormity of emissions of this project. So with the EPA, we have this whole submissions process, and after a record-breaking number of appeals from the public and a 12-month appeals process, it will soon be time for our State Environment Minister, Reece Whitby, to make a decision on whether to approve or reject the North West Shelf extension. We need your help to protect both our climate and communities from further warming by signing this do-gooder. It's like a petition that will send an email straight to your MP. So in just a few seconds, we can email our MPs to urge them to call on Minister Whitby to reject Woodside's dangerous project. So yeah, I really love to all take climate action right now together. If you pull out your phone, you can just scan a QR code with the camera app on your phone. Yeah, we've got, our politicians in the room are laughing because they'll be getting these emails. Don't worry, I've got some instructions for you this way. Okay, if everyone's got that open, so what will open up is this. So you can see the message we're sending to our members of parliament, calling on them to urge Mr. Whitby to reject the North West Shelf extension. Just chuck in your details, and it should only take a few moments to send your email. I'll continue while you do that. So the Go Gas movement are also working together to turn the heat down at the source by engaging with our local communities and key decision makers to keep gas in the ground, secure strong climate legislation for WA, and turn WA into a leader in renewable energy. So if you're interested in joining us, you can sign up on your way out at our registration desk or come and have a chat about what that can look like. And for any MPs or policy workers in the room tonight, here are our top mitigation recommendations. We have major concerns about the future emissions of Woodside's proposed extension of the Northwest Shelf project. Minister Rees Whitby is on the verge of deciding whether to accept or reject the project. Your intervention has helped stop the proposal, so please communicate these concerns to Minister Whitby. Many environmental groups are concerned about the climate bill and the fact that it does not include the 2030 interim statewide target, unlike all other states and the federal government. Can you please strengthen the bill to include a 2030 interim statewide emissions reduction target to prove you are serious about climate change? We need to make meaningful cuts to greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as possible if we're going to do our part to avoid the worst effects of climate change. And finally, caving into pressure from industry groups and with no community consultation, the WA government has announced plans that will undermine the WA's Environmental Protection Authority, or EPA. Can you please advocate for the plan to be revised to guarantee WA a stronger environmental assessment process? And can you please advocate for our fundamental right to be informed and participate in decisions made about our environment? Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. Yeah, a really meaningful call to action. And it's also really meaningful to do this in partnership with you guys. I think we just get to approach this issue from two different ends of both mitigating, there we go, mitigating the climate crisis as well as dealing with the impacts from heat. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. I think you're again for everyone else. That was really meaningful dialogue as well. I just want to briefly let you all know about some of the efforts that we're doing at Waitrose to address heat, and currently the project that's going on around heat. So we are doing a heat vulnerability project at Waitrose, and that's in partnership with the Department of Communities and Department of Health. We also have a lot of other valuable contributors, like Claire mentioned, she's on that team as well as James. And we're also engaging with various groups as well as Curtin University. We've been working with Wildness on this as well. So we have a lot of really valuable contributors on this. What this looks like. So this screen has several key points on this, but it's really two main streams. We're trying to understand across WA, what does heat vulnerability look like? So where do we have populations that are more at risk, and what does that look like across the state? So that's taking into account a lot of the things that we were talking about today. The socioeconomic impacts, the health vulnerabilities, and then as well running in adaptive capacity. So where are people dealing with that as well? Where do we see things that are already starting to recognize ways that we can solve heat vulnerability as well? So that is a mapping effort that's being done with different data components, and we'll be releasing next year. We're in the midst of it, so apologies, nothing out right now, but we'll be releasing in about a year a map that looks at those different levels as well. And we think that'll be a really compelling call to local governments, as well as frankly to us as individuals to start looking at, is my community at risk? What are the things that are playing into that? And what does that look like for our community as well? And then on the other stream, we're also piloting interventions across 3 sites in WA. So that's City of Rockingham, Town of Port Hedland, and then Shire of Bridgeton and Bushes. Obviously 3 drastically different sites. And we're really trying to understand, what does it look like to be dealing with heat in locations that are really, really different. And we're hoping to have really valuable input from those communities as we co-design this process of heat interventions. And run various, we're not sure yet what the interventions will be, because we really want to hear from the communities that are most at risk on what they want to do. So we're really looking forward to having some valuable insights from that as well. So pay attention to this space. But in the more immediate, I think we're all hit by, it's a really serious issue and a really serious conversation. And it can feel quite draining and quite emotional, frankly, to think about the impacts of this. but there are some things that we can start doing. And we have here a lot of really meaningful groups and people who are in positions of power to see things done. And so we just want to start thinking about what it looks like to prepare. And so this is there's a lot of sort of key action plan things out there to start thinking about this. And so there's a lot of different ways of going about this, but I tried to sort of personalize it to WA and what that looks like. So first step, you guys have done tonight, Chet, you understand a bit more about warning systems in what a heat wave means, what it means to be at these different levels as well. And this is based off of the new system that Clare was looking at as well. So have a bit of an understanding around that, what it looks like. Next step is to really define the at-risk population within your community or your organizations to start thinking about people that are at risk. For us as individuals too, to go, who in my life do I know that needs to just be checked in, etc. And then to identify stakeholders and your existing assets, to be thinking about how those can play into any interventions. On the personal note, you can start thinking about what levers you can pull, what ways you can engage with people. And then to align key intervention responses with the various levels of heat wave. So as you're responding, thinking through what that means. And then lastly, just to document, write it down. Think about what you're doing. Think about what your community is doing. Think about what your local governments are doing. This is also really a broad call to your local government as well to say, do they have plans set up? We're noting that a lot of local governments in their local emergency management arrangements, LEMAs, oftentimes heat is not a consideration. Bushfire is, and that's wonderful, but it needs to be experienced. We need to start with heat. Also, as you look at public health plans as well, it's oftentimes also not factored in. So putting out calls to start recognizing these things in these documents is really good. And that is pretty much the call from us. Do just take a look at those resources as well on the back of this sheet, as well as you also have when you see as well that's coming up as well. I just want to point that CCWA is running and some other resources as well. So take a read. There's been a lot of interesting information tonight. There's a lot more out there. Before we go, I just want to thank Go Beyond Gas again for partnering on this event. We're really happy that this could happen. Just grateful to get this, make this happen. Also thank you to Daniel, who I think has since left, but really meaningful work in the country. We also just want to thank Meteorology, James, for coming tonight, as well as Dr. Gibellini and Carolyn. Really meaningful to have your expertise, and Clare as well. Just really meaningful to have you and your advocacy around this space. You're very generous in this space, so thank you. To UWA as well, thank you for hosting this, really valuable. And to our many team members on this project, as well as on various other things, thank you. So to all, we'll say goodnight, but feel free to mingle and meet other people. There are a lot of really meaningful people in the space here tonight. So thanks so much.